Hi, everybody. It's pleasure. Let's get rocking and rolling. So this one is not much of a feature as it is a flex. Before we used to tell people that SignAgent, when you're editing signs, bulk editing signs, stick to 300, 500. We can now, made improvements. You can update up to 1,000. So we can see here, I've updated uh, almost 1,100 signs, just over 1,100 signs. I've changed their state. Uh, and, this is obviously sped up a little bit, but yeah, it was able to handle that many signs very, very easily. So that's something to look forward to in your large bulk editing needs. The next one here is we're diving into the mobile front. So this is just a quick recording of the mobile app. We're going to dive a little bit into some of the location plan tools. So I'm going to click into one of our location plans here that is actually an exterior plan. So this is the site map or the map that everybody's familiar with, very similar to Google Maps. You see it on the desktop, but now on mobile, on the bottom right-hand corner, if you click satellite, you get access to our new satellite view. So this is going to be a big help for anybody that's going to be doing any kind of exterior surveying and any kind of outside work if you need some additional reference information in terms of what you're doing. Now, for this next little example here, I'm just going to create a quick little sign marker here or a survey marker just to kind of highlight one of the other new features. And in the background, I'm actually going to break something. So on the web version, which you're not seeing, is I'm actually deleting the state that I assigned this sign marker to. And the next step, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to attempt to sync this sign marker to the state that no longer exists. So before, this was going to cause a huge issue. A lot of the times you would get an error message that you really didn't know what it meant. But now, here we look, we're syncing down the system. Since it's only a single sign, it's not going to take very long at all. And there we have it. We actually have what's called a sync error now. And this is going to break it down to what kind of sync error it is, what kind of object it's pertaining to. So if it's a missing state, it'll let you know it's a missing state. Also, I've been told by our development team as well that if you have a sync error on a single sign, this does not discontinue the syncing for all the signs. Now, we also if you click on the top right-hand corner, there is a sync errors button here as well. So you can actually see a dialog of all the sync errors that have been logged. And then if you dig deeper into it, you can actually see some additional information here. Now, by all means, sync errors are still scary, so by all means, reach out to us at any time if you ever run into these, and we're always happy to help get these fixed. But with this additional information surfaced, it makes it a lot easier for everybody. All right, references. And so references is a fun tool available in SignAgent. A lot of times we use it mostly for numbering. So this is a quick example here. So right now I have 20 or 30 signs here. I'm just going to multi-select and I want to renumber them using references. You'll see this often in multi-residential situations where the first floor is similar to the second and similar to the third. So for this one, I'm just going to type 1 for the hundreds digit. And then for the reference information, I'm going to do an open curly bracket, 0, 1, and then a closed curly bracket. So that means the sequential information is going to be within that the curly brackets, and the 1 is going to stay the same. So we can see here, once I go ahead and save this information, the numbers will update, and then we'll go ahead and get right here 101, 102, 103, 104. So it makes it easy. Now, one of the new updates that we have is you can actually have two references within a single numbering convention. So that means you can have two levels of sequential information applied. So for this one, I'm going to do an open curly bracket and a 1 and a closed curly bracket for the hundreds digit. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did for the previous example. So open curly bracket, 0, 1, closed curly bracket. So now we have two different sequential numbering options here. If we go ahead and save this, It'll just take a quick second. And what we'll see is when the examples update here, we will see that the numbers will then proceed from now 101, 202, 303, 404. Now, one thing I always like to remind people as well, references are not just exclusive to numbering. References actually can be applied to a lot of information within SignAgent. So by all means, I always recommend that you do some research on our knowledge base under referencing, and you can find out how we can actually pull information from one part of SignAgent into others. All right, now this is my absolute favorite update that I've seen in a while. So I think a lot of us have seen situations where we are in organizations that, we have a lot of work, a lot of history in there, and that means there's going to be a lot of sign types and a lot of folders. And say you're working in a very specific sign, and you're like, oh, I need to update this field, or I need some additional information here. Well, there's actually a way now that you can access the sign type directly through the sign. So right now you can see I'm in a sign, an A2 sign, and I don't have any of the folders open for the sign types. All I have to do now, if I need to update that sign type, is I'm going to scroll down a little bit here, and then under the messaging information, we see those three bars, or what we call the hamburger. If you click on the hamburger, we're going to see a new option that says Edit Sign Type Fields. If we click on that, that's going to open directly to the sign type. Not only that, if you take a look on the left-hand side there, it actually opens the folder that the sign type is in as well. So it makes it very, very easy if you need to just snap to the sign type or edit this information. It is now simpler than ever.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm going to take over for the next couple here. This is less of an update to any features and more of a process update that has changed how we work in the system. So it used to be that when we advised you on how to work within a project, that we said you always want to turn on everything that's relevant. So if we are moving signs from one state to another, we want both of those states turned on. We want to be able to see everything that we're working on. And that's not always the case anymore. So in this case, we are looking at like a design state that we are going to fill out some information for and then move into a review state. And what we recommend in this case is actually having that review state off. This is similar to the workflow that we recommend when installing signs, where as signs are approved, we want them to be filtered out. And so what is going to happen is by turning off that review state, I go in, I add my information as necessary, and I update the state to that now non-visible review so that when I save, this sign drops out of the sign list and off of the map. This is a good practice if we are working on large projects where we might have hundreds of signs that we're updating. This is how we can keep track of where we are easily, as well as basically make sure that we're not, having to re-find our place. If I step away and then come back to work on those signs, I don't want to have to find where I was in the list. I just want that list to be, cleared and ready to go for me. So using the states is going to be really important, and it's hopefully just another reason to start breaking down your work a little further. The big feature that we're going to be going through today that is brand new is the AI translation tool. So this is basically an update to the existing managed messages that you should already be familiar with. This is essentially just the AI version of this where it is a good starting point. So I'm actually going to do this with an error the very first time because any organization that has been created up until this point is probably going to get this error when you first do this. Only organizations created from kind of now on will skip what I'm about to show you. But basically, in the translation section, there is now an AI button, and you may get this error that just says, hey, we need a primary language. Now, you have probably already assigned a primary language. What we need it to be, though, is one that is in our recognized AI list. So basically, a list of languages that we can work from and translate to. And so in this case, we're going to need to set this primary language for an organization so that the system knows what language you're working out of, specifically for those translations. Once that's done, we can come back to that manage messages, and this is going to be the process that you'll actually go through. So we're going to create a language just like we normally would. We're only working for text. I wish AI was good enough to go for visuals, maybe one day. But for right now, we are going to say that it's an AI language, and we're going to select what we want to translate into. We don't have all languages, but boy, there are a lot of them in there right now. And so when you do that, it is still just as important, if not more so, to hit that check mark, basically saying that we need a human in the loop to verify this. The system is going to do its best and give you a whole bunch of translations, but it is now more important than ever to have a real person look at this to confirm that work, just because AI isn't perfect. We can also then, just like any other language, set the fields that we want to translate. This is going to tell which messages the AI is going to do that translation for. And so in this case, we'll attach the message field, and we'll see that when we come to our manage messages, all of those AI translations are going to start being populated. It's basically going to run through that list as we add more messages to more signs. They'll show up here and get a translation as well. And you'll see beside all of them, there's a little yellow flag. That is saying that these need to be reviewed. So we'll get the original text, the AI translation, and then also the confidence of that translation. So in this case, the system is pretty confident that yes, this is the correct translation. And so we're going to hit that approve. But this is a slow process. We don't want to do that for every single one of these. And so the flag up at the top of the column is going to let us do this in bulk. So there's a couple of pieces to this. Right off the bat, you can see that very top one. The system is less sure on that translation, and so it gives it a lower confidence rating. Everything else is the same as that approval we just looked at, where each one of these has its own check mark. But more importantly, there is the all viewed option. This means you don't have to check everything individually, and it keeps track of how far you scroll. So if I scroll to here and I keep going, the things that have not shown up on my page yet are not included in that all viewed. We are keeping track of what's been reviewed, again, because there can be hundreds of translations, and we don't want to make you check every single one of those altogether. So we'll approve 25 out of 26, which will remove those flags. There's still one flag because there's still one message. So the language is not fully approved until everything has been viewed and approved by a person. But we can also continue to make additions and changes. The AI part of this is just at the beginning for the first translation. Everything else comes for you after the fact, right? Any changes that we make, we save that, and it's no longer AI driven, so you don't have to worry about accuracy from that point forward. While we're talking about translations, just a quality of life update that you may not have seen is the addition of multiple translations in quick order. It used to be that this was a pretty slow process where we had to let things load in between each translation that you updated. So, we'd set a translation and then it would take a while to load. That is no longer the case. We can add lots of translations back to back without any issues or things getting confused here. So going through, adding them as fast as I can, the system can keep up with that. There is one area where we will still have to wait, but even this is a lot faster, and that is when we change the actual original message that is being translated from. The reason for this is just that the system has to go through and find everywhere that that message is used and double check that it's not used in other signs now that we are updating that message and that things might have to get merged together. Basically, there's a lot of checking that happens. But again, this processing that we see is a lot faster than it used to be. There's been a lot of improvements here. And so hopefully that can speed up the work that you're doing. All right, moving out of messages and features into one of the more complicated things that we're going to touch on today, which is scale. So we used to tell people, avoid putting scale on your location plans unless you are going to be using scaled markers. That was just basically because it was too easy to screw things up in a kind of a long-term way for yourself. And so this new set of rules and features basically is just safety netting. It is a lot harder to make permanent alterations that we can't walk back from. And so let's just take a look at that process because what I have here is a set of plans. We have a set with at a 1 to 10 scale and a set at a 1 to 20 scale. And we're going to start looking at one of these if there is no scale set. So anytime that we are worried about, getting multiple versions of plans or the scale might change, we want to include that scale. And here's why. When I don't have that information there, SignAgent doesn't know anything about the relation between these two signs. So when I get the new set of plans that are at 1 to 20 scale, and we move these two signs over to that new location plan, their location relative to each other is now broken compared to the scale. So what that looks like is when we go over here, I'm going to say, oh no, where are my signs? Because they no longer fit on the plan according to this, right? The document size has changed. This can be a huge pain. If you have to manually move 1,000 sign markers, it is not going to be a fun time. So to avoid that, what we do is we work with that scale. Now, this can be added to locations that already exist or done when we're first uploading a plan. We're basically just going to choose what that scale is, and you can see that it's been added to the history here. This gives SignAgent a true understanding of the real world relationship between one sign marker and another. And so moving from a plan with scale to one without, or with scale to another with scale becomes really easy if anticlimactic, because when I move this, everything is just going to line up. The math gets done on the back end to figure out where those new sign markers should be, and everything looks correct. We don't have to manually move things back into place. The only move we may have to do is if the plan has the drawing shifted a little bit on it, so now things don't perfectly line up. But again, this becomes easy because we basically bulk drag all our markers back into their correct spot. That's one change instead of having to change every single sign marker to figure out where it went. So this is a really powerful and useful tool. The bad news is not all the time is the scale that we get there or accurate. And so I want to take just a moment to talk about how we figure that out from the location plans that were provided. And the first thing is we need to know the true dimensions of something, whether that's a wall or a corridor or anything on the plan that we can measure where we know the real world length of something. That is our starting point. We have to have one true piece of information. And the longer it is, the better, because we're going to be measuring longer spans mean that there's less room for human error. I clicked 1 pixel further to the left matters a lot more when the total distance is longer. But what we're going to do is just use like an Acrobat measuring tool to figure out the true dimensions of, in this case, our 1 meter line. And from that, we can just back calculate what the actual scale factor is. This is easier to do in metric because all we have to do is say we have 1,000 millimeters in the real world represented by 75 in this document, and that is a 1 to 13.3 scale. The term we use is scale factor. And that is the number that we can plug into this location here. So it may not be in the dropdown available, but we have this 13.3 here. Now, I am going to get an error when I do this because we can only work with whole numbers. So there are options where we can say, okay, well, we're just going to round and be close enough. We can resize the document. There's a few different options, but even if you don't have an accurate scale, we can still work with this information and still get a lot of value because even doing math is easier than moving 1,000 signs into their correct spots. And so if you want to learn more about this, this is especially relevant for folks who do a lot of like long-term sign management, where you might have a full-scale or a full floor plan and then get construction drawings that are just a partial and at a completely different size. We have a support article that is all on the steps and general best practices around that, including a video that will walk you through that. And we'd recommend checking that out if it comes up. But the real takeaway here is that even if we don't think we're going to be using scaled markers, including scale in your floor plans is a good way to make your life easier if changes happen in the future. And as always, if you run into any trouble where, sign markers are not where you expect, that's what the support team is for. We can come in and assist with this, but hopefully this makes it a little bit more self-serve. Okay, for something a little bit easier, we're just going to change gears and talk about the build Kanban. So this was designed with the idea that we wanted to keep things as simple as possible, with as little information being thrown at people when they first come in here as we can. But we've heard that still having filtering tools would be really nice. And so we have added a filtering button in the top right corner that anybody can use beside the search. And this is operating the same way that we're used to with visibility filters. It's the same folder structure as in the design view with all of the sign types located in their folders. It's the same check mark on, off, or some on and off in a folder that you're used to. And so this basically lets us either, clear everything and look for something very specific, or have everything selected and then turn off a few things. There is also a search at the top, which means that I can search for the word corridor and it will find that sign type, or I can search for the word stair and it will find the sign type and the folders that are relevant. So it's an easy way to work and find kind of what you're looking for in the system without being too technically dense, maybe like the design view of things can be. The locations work the exact same way, just with a different icon to indicate that they're locations. And then we also have tags as well. Now, tags can't be added from the build view. This is only for tags that have already been added. And so if we don't have tags, we can't search for that. If we have any tags, it will give us a list of them. And then we can search from within what's already been added. Now, the one thing to note is the visibility filter here does not stop filtering just because we have closed down the window. So if I were to close that down, my filters are still active. I want to always be looking for that little red dot saying you have an active filter running that may be hiding some of your signs. So something to keep in mind, but a powerful tool that lets this particular tool work in a similar way to the design tool flexibility. All right. So keeping right along here, we are going to talk about this one here, which is just a new behavior that you may have seen when we're creating new signs. So this is specifically for folks with a large sign catalog like Jeff was talking about. It can be difficult to either know where your sign types are, manage them, find things like that. And it is common to walk into an organization and see that we have this nice folder structure already set up and then a bunch of just loose sign types underneath of it. This is a UI change to prevent exactly that. So we still have the ability to create a sign type when we are creating a sign. So let's say I type in TO1, which is a totally unused sign. There is still an add new sign type button at the bottom that we can use to make a new sign type. That is still a workflow that is possible. I know some people like that. But what we've done is we've made it a little bit easier that if you are looking for an existing sign type, the D1 in this case, when we go and we type in D1, this is no longer the first option. We prioritize the things that already exist and now put that add new type button down at the bottom so it's still accessible, but you're less likely to click on it by accident and create something that you weren't intending for. This is just a way to select what's already there. And so we'll be prioritizing that, and hopefully that makes keeping your sign library a little bit more organized, easier. Okay. So this is the end, we're not expecting as many questions because things were a little bit simpler and straightforward compared to our usual webinar. But yeah, I'll open things up for any questions that we might have.
Hey Alex. Hi
Yeah.
everybody. Larissa from the customer success team here. I'll start with the first one here is if I have to add a sign, can I use the renumbering when adding the sign?
Renumbering when adding a sign. Oh, okay. That's an interesting question. So where I would suggest for that renumbering, we can get the right behavior from that just by starting, where would I go?
So
Let's,
just to specify a little bit more, sorry for the
yeah.
example, there was a secondary statement.
Oh, okay.
For example, I have to add a sign where 5 was, but I want to reorder the rest of the signs after. Does that help clarify a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And so what we would do for that is we would rely on the auto numbering. So I'm going to create just a one-off sign here. If I create something by default, it's going to use the auto numbering that we've set and set this sign as the first one. It's our number one. If I want to renumber everything after that, for example, I'm going to start with sign 50 here for this next one. I'm going to put this in by hand. And the system is then going to say, great, the next number is 50. I'm going to take over from there. And so we need to put in that first one manually, but now we've got 51. And so as we keep going, that is how we can add that break. Renumbering is generally best left for the end or closer to the end of a project when things are a little bit more stabilized. We're not going to be adding signs or taking them away nearly as much. And so that is when, we might want to do a cleanup where we formerly had a bunch of different numbers here that may be scattered. And so we do a one renumber to clean things up. That's generally the best practice that we're looking for.
Great. Um, Thank you, Alex. Following that, can auto numbering be used in other fields like the message field? So, for example, a hotel floor that starts at suite 101 and continues through 120, and then floor 2 is 201 through 220 and so forth. Can that be
Yeah.
used in the message field?
Yeah, so we're not going to use the auto numbering, but that's exactly right that we are going to work with these with references. So I actually should check whether we have a, a message field in this, but what we're going to do is use the reference to set that. So as an example, I'm just going to put this in notes because I don't have a ton of fields here, but using that same tool, if we use a reference directly within the field, when I save this, this is now going to auto number sequentially for everything that I've selected. And so doing this either a floor at a time is a great way to take those values and not have to enter them all by hand. We can see that we've got these in our order here. And so the other piece to this is that it's going to be in the same order that we were in our numbering list. So in our sign list, sorry. So if things are actually in a different order and I truly want, this sign to be one and this sign to be, or actually let me give a better example. We have a gap here and we have 50 and 51, and I want to renumber that one I put here should be 51 and everything after should be updated. That is where we can cheat a little bit, where I'm going to say that this is actually like 50.1 or 50.5 or something like that, just to get it in the right order in this list, right? If I had put it here and it throws it in as number 53 at the end, that's not great because I want to preserve this order that I'm working for. And so kind of artificially putting it in a different spot in the list, 50.1, point 2, whatever it might be, means that when we do go to renumber these as a whole, now they are all in the correct order when I go and I put that command in. So that there are some different tips and tricks around that, certainly. The other thing to remember is just always that you can use this also to pull information between fields, something that Jeff alluded to. So I can even pull information from this field back into this field, which gives me, 102, followed by 102, or I can pull from materials into notes as long as they're the same type of field. So there's a lot of flexibility for data manipulation that comes with this. And if you ever get a complex situation, let us know. We're happy to take a look and see what we can do.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Another one here. Is it good practice to switch on only one type of sign when renumbering? So if multiple sign
Hmm.
types are switched on, will the auto numbering have a conflict?
That's a great question. And that depends on how your auto numbering is set up. So I'm going to come to the settings for the organization as a whole here, and we're going to look at the sign list here. If your auto numbering is done like this is by location, then the sign type doesn't matter. As long as we only turn on all the signs on one floor plan, we can renumber those in whatever order we want. As we get more granular, though, for example, let's say we auto number by location and type. That is a situation where if we were to renumber things, because we are now numbering based off the type, we would have to do one sign type at a time for each location. And so the more granular we get with auto numbering, the more passes we have to do when we go to renumber that. The least common one that gets used is organization, mostly just because it gets hard to manage and keep track of. But this would let us renumber everything across all locations and all types all in one shot. So it really depends on what you consider, like how your auto numbering is working, because that really determines what is considered a duplicate and what isn't.
Perfect. Thank you. We have a couple more here. I'm gonna ask one regarding scale. So we're gonna pivot a little
Mhm.
bit away from renumbering. So do you have to have the scale applied to a location plan from the start, or is it something you can add to your existing plan and the new plan after you've realized they are at different scales?
Great question. It's something that we can come back and do. So this is our new plan that did not have a scale. I'm gonna edit that, and we can see that there is nothing set for it right now. If I add a scale, this was the 1 to 20. Yeah, perfect. You're not going to get this particular view with these extra options. That's just for our own internal team to help fix things for folks. But basically, once you apply that scale, you now are going to be adding that scale onto this plan, as we can see here. Or if let's say we have a new scale we're uploading, when we choose that file that we're going to be adding, we can add it then as well. And so we're not stuck. If you haven't done this, that's totally fine. If you have and we need to change it, that also works. Basically, this is what I meant about there's a lot of guidelines and bumpers around this that make it harder to break things. So I set this in my new document to a 1 to 5 scale. As you can see here, if I made a mistake, I can always go back and delete it. This is another piece that came out of this is the ability to delete old floor plans. Now, unless something is broken, we don't recommend doing this because it does give you the history of all of the documents that were used in the system, but it is basically an undo button that if you do something and it looks wrong, we're not in trouble. We can always just go and remove that plan.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. The remainder of the questions, I think we're going to answer those separately. So I'm going to call it there for the live questions. But thank you, everybody, for your questions. And we will answer those off the call.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate the time. Again, as James mentioned, please fill out our survey at the end, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next one of these.